Let's go straight across to my first guest, P. Chidambaram, senior Congress MP, former finance minister, also appeared in this case on behalf of one of the petitioners. Mr. Chidambaram, would you now concede that the majority Supreme Court verdict today effectively nullifies, puts to rest the basic argument made by critics, including yourself, that the demonetization process followed by the Narendra Modi government was badly flawed? Would you agree that that argument has been set at rest now by the court? It was legal.
No, I don't agree with that. Let me make it clear at the outset that I'm not in your show as an advocate who appeared in the case. I'm here as a member of parliament representing the Congress party. Now, what was our argument? Our argument was, politically as well as among the advocates in court, our argument was the objectives that was set out before the country for demonetization were never achieved. And the Supreme Court has absolutely steered clear of that question. They say we are not going to judge the decision by whether it has achieved objectives or not. If the government wants to feel vindicated, it's welcome to do so. But there is no imprimatur of the Supreme Court that the objectives of demonetization as set out on November 8, 2016 were actually achieved.
But Mr. Chidambaram, the legal question raised in the Supreme Court was simply this, whether the government had followed due process, and the court by a majority judgment has said yes, it was followed. So therefore, the decision taken to demonetize currency was as per law, not violative of that. Do you agree with that? That is the basic fallout of the judgment?
I agree. Once the majority has declared the law, you and I and everyone else is bound by the law. That is the law. That is the law today after the majority judgment. But it doesn't still the questions, doesn't still the criticism. Because there is a minority judgment which points out that there is a different interpretation to section 26 subsection 2. And after going through the 4 documents placed before the court in a sealed cover, the minority judgment says this decision emanated from the central government and not from the RBI. Now I agree, that is a minority judgment. But remember what a famous Chief Justice of the United States said many years ago, and it's been repeated 1,000 times over. A dissent is an appeal to the brooding spirit of the law, to the intelligence of a future day. I can give you any number of examples where what is a dissenting statement of law today has 10, 20 years later become the accepted view.
But Mr. Chidambaram, what the court seems to be also saying is reasserting the primacy of the executive to take such economic decisions, that they cannot be supervised by a court of law or indeed even done post facto in parliament, because otherwise the secrecy of demonetization would have ended. Do you therefore agree that at the end of the day, you all were misplaced to challenge that basic decision of the executive to demonetize currency? That was well within the powers of the government.
I acknowledge, I concede that the majority judgment says the plenary powers of Parliament to do demonetization, like it did twice before, is the same as the executive government's power under section 26, subsection 2. Effectively, the majority has said what Parliament can do by a plenary law can also be done under section 26, subsection 2. Now, I respectfully and beg to take a different view, but I concede that that point has been rejected by the majority of the Supreme Court. It has been upheld by the minority judgment.
So does effectively, Mr. Chidambaram, this majority judgment put an end to all the controversy that have swirled around demonetization 6 years later? Do you believe even politically now, demonetization is no longer an issue on the table?
No, it will be an issue. Remember, ADM Jabalpur was an issue until ADM Jabalpur was overruled by a later Supreme Court. The judgment on homosexuality was an issue until it was overruled. The judgment that only woman can be accused of adultery and a man cannot be, was overruled. There were any number of judgments have been reversed after 10, 20, 30 years. A.K. Gopalan was reversed after 30, 40 years. I'm not saying this majority judgment will be reversed. I'm only saying that the proposition that the executive government's power under section 26(2) is equal or more or less the same as Parliament's power to pass a plenary legislation on demonetization, I hope will be reconsidered at some future date. Not maybe in a demonetization case, but in another case.
But you know, Mr. Chidambaram, you said at the outset of this interview that the objectives of demonetization, whether they were met or not, the court has stayed away from that contentious issue. Now, do you believe that in a way this argument still needs to be debated? Or are you of the view that the government has just changed the goalpost? Let's be very clear. The argument whether objectives have been met or not is not a legal argument. Do you believe there's still a need for a political debate on it now?
Of course, not at all. What did the government say? Fake currency will be identified and weeded out of the system. Every one of the currency notes was issued. So fake currency was also exchanged by the banks. 99.3% of the currency has returned to the bank. Secondly, they said this will eliminate black money. Every other day, you find that the Income Tax Department, the CBI, ED, seizing unaccounted money, which is black money. They said we will move towards the cashless economy. Then they changed the goalpost to say less cash economy. What is the result? On the day of demonetization, the cash in circulation was about 17 lakh crore. Today it is double, 33 lakh crore, 32, 33 lakh crore. Therefore, which objective has been achieved? No objective has been achieved. They said we will stop financing of terrorism. But every other day, even this morning's paper says 3 terrorists were killed, 3 terrorists killed 3 citizens. So financing of terrorism has not stopped. So which objective has been
digitization? Digitization.
Besides, digitization and demonetization has no connection at all. Even without demonetization, digitization would have happened. It would have happened at the same pace.
Sir, the government has also said, or government supporters say, since 2016, several elections have been held. In most of them, the BJP has emerged triumphant, including the 2019 general elections. It got a majority. In a sense, the people of the country have already vindicated the decision of demonetization, not just the courts.
Now, was demonetization the only or the central issue in an election? I thought they had other issues before the people. They had Ram Mandir. They had Article 370, they had the promise of putting an end to so-called love jihad. Therefore, demonetization was not the central issue in any election. Anyway, which issue was central to which voter, nobody knows. You don't know, I don't know. Therefore, let's not justify demonetization by the electoral result. Will you then say that the Himachal Pradesh people have rejected demonetization while the Gujarat people have upheld demonetization? I mean, these are meaningless arguments. Elections are fought on multiple issues. And I don't believe that the last election was fought on the main issue or the principal issue or the central issue of demonetization.
One final question. Do you, as a former finance minister, in conclusion, believe that the RBI's autonomy was undermined by demonetization? Today, the court has said the RBI was consulted over 6 months. You know, that the decision was taken in consultation. Do you believe the role of the RBI still needs to be looked at, even post this verdict?
It is. It is. Remember, the RBI governor who agreed to demonetization resigned within a few months thereafter when he was asked to take another unpalatable decision, namely to declare a huge dividend by the RBI, contrary to all norms and all past practices. Therefore, RBI, well, we'll have to wait until Mr. Urjit Patel writes his memoirs. He's not yet written a memoir. The only book he has written does not talk about demonetization at all. Therefore, I think the judgment on that is reserved. But the RBI was virtually railroaded into agree to a decision, has to wait. The majority, bless them, they have steered clear of all that. They said we are not going to examine whether the objectives were achieved. We are not going to examine the wisdom of the decision. That is not our job. That is the job of the Parliament and the government. My real worry is that the majority judgment has said, in more or less the following terms, that the plenary power of Parliament to pass legislation on demonetization is equal to the executive government's power under Section 26(2). Now that, I think, has very serious implications, not only for the issue of demonetization, but any other power under any other law. Can we say that the plenary power of Parliament is equal to executive government's power under an act, or the other way around? Can we say that the executive government's power under a section of an act is equal to the plenary power of Parliament? I think that debate will start, that debate will continue, and of course, I concede that as of today, as far as the Reserve Bank of India Act is concerned, and as far as demonetization is concerned, that power has been held by a majority to be equal, and we as citizens are bound by the declaration of law by the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I don't quarrel with that proposition at all. We are bound by that law. But I would raise the larger question. Can the executive government's power under a section of an act be ever equal or nearly equal to Parliament's power to pass plenary legislation? I think the debate will start on that issue.
Let's leave it there, Mr. Chidambaram. You've raised plenty of issues that are food for thought, but clearly you are conceding that the Supreme Court, in a sense, has reaffirmed the government's, the executive's right to demonetize currency. P. Chidambaram, thanks very much for joining me.